Sayyid Hassan Raza, and my group members are Majid Ramzan, Abdul Moiz Sheikh, and Rahul. So today we are going to present on Ukraine-Russia conflicts, impacts on supermarket supply chain. It is introduction. The war between Ukraine and Russia, which begins in February 2022, caused significant food supply chain disruption worldwide. Both countries are wheat, corn, sunflower oil, and fertilizer exporter worldwide. The objectives of our this presentation is case study. The objectives of our case study is analyze the conflict between Ukraine and Russia and the extent to which is disrupt supermarket supply chain, find out where the problem is most significant, issues the alternatives, and propose recommendation to address this issue. The challenges which management faces are supply storage and increases in cost increases and significant risks. The importance conflict with food supply chain all over the world increase the cost and the causing food is insecurity. Supermarket expensive inventory deficiency and increase in the prices. The audience target audience is supermarket logistics, procurement and store strategic teams. The background of the Ukraine-Russia conflicts. Ukraine and Russia alone contribute a consideration proportion of the world grain products. Ukraine is the one of the largest exporter of the wheat, barley, maize, and sunflower oil in the globe, with Russia begins the largest exporter of the wheat and the fertilizers. Food supply chain of the supermarket were disrupted on all levels, sourcing, transportation, and shelf availability. The key issues are block seas port, black block seas port, limited transportation risk, and rising fuel prices and shipping increasing. The next slide is problem justification, that the problem under investigation is the destructive case by the ongoing war, Russia and Ukraine conflicts on global supply chain, particularly in the supermarket industry, which heavily depends on the food product from on through the countries. The key issues included uh, block port, limited transportation, and the impact of the disruption of the food prices and availability. Why this case study is important? Because Russia and Ukraine are the most supplier in the world, 29% of globe wheat, 60%, and sunflower of oil, 30%. We choose this study because there is some research questions that we will address in this case study. The questions are: how has the Ukraine-Russia conflict distributed supply supermarket food supply chain? Which product is the most affected and why? What alternative have supermarket implemented to the migrant distributions? How have these alternative impact product availability and prices? What sustainability strategies can reduce the reliance on the Ukraine-Russia war? So these are the some questions that which we address in this case study, and some my and next my colleagues will explain all the questions. So now I am hand over to the Majid. So Majid, please carry on and explain these questions in the next slides why these are important.
Yeah, thank you, Sayed Hassan Reza. Good morning, everyone. My name is Majid Ramzan, and today I will briefly talk about the impact of Russian-Ukraine war on supermarket supply chain, especially on food and fuel, and how some alternatives were developed to deal with the crisis. So, first of all, I will discuss about the disrupted food supply chain. Uh, in this topic, the war disrupted the food supply badly. Ukraine is a major exporter of wheat, as well as iron, corn, and sunflower oil. Due to the war, from February 2022 to February 2022 to May 2022, prices of these items increase up to 60%. Stable products like bread and oil become harder to find, especially in Europe countries, because the products of bread and oil were increased too much. After that, now I will talk about the crude oil. It's the thumb rule. If some countries economy are going to down, it's really effect on the crude oil. The war also affected crude oil prices because of the political decision like sections and military actions. Oil prices went up sharply in 2022, as we can say in a graph, after Russia invasion, prices of WTI and Brent oil jumped quickly. This rise in fuel cost impacted transport the fuel prices globally. Uh, the third one, now I will talk about the alternative development. To manage this crisis, different alternatives were developed. How they developed. So the Black Sea Grain Initiative was signed by the UN and the Turkey to allow export from Ukraine ports. This is the alternative thing. Next one is EU created. The EU created solidarity lanes via Poland and Romania to export goods by rail as well as from all over the road. This is the also a good creation. The third one that we have is a supermarket started diversified sourcing by grain from South America, but this increased cost by 20 to 30%. Yeah, we can buying grains from South America, but it will uh, it will increase the price by the 20 to 30%. That is too much, but we can accept it. And the fourth one that we have is a product substitution. So product substitution also happened for example, olive oil. Olive oil replaced by the sunflower oil in some products. Now we will go to the impact of alternatives. What's impact if we go for the alternative? These alternatives help but were not perfect. Like grain, the grain initiative helps restore 50% of pre-war export level temporarily. Second one is solidarity lane worked but had limited capacity. Third one is price went down a little bit uh, in late 2022, but started rising again in 2023 after the initiative collapsed. So the last one is sourcing from other countries. We can source from other countries, but it will likely increase from 10 to 15% in prices for consumer. Consumer will affect too much on by this increase. Uh, and if I talk about the EU, also EU in structure were not strong enough to fully replace Ukraine export. So I do not have the much time to explain all these. So I already explained the impact of alternatives as well as the alternatives development and the crude oil prices. So now I will go towards the conclusion. So in conclusion, the war had a big impact on global food as well as on the fuel supply chain. It this also impact in the market everywhere, like Russia and Ukraine war. When the war begins, the prices are going to be very high. So, although many solutions were tried, but they had their own limits. They have to try, like we have tried impact of sorry we have tried the alternative developments, but they have their own limits. Where we have they have their own limits. So we can say that this situation remind us how interconnected and the global supply chain really is. So it's a very huge huge thing that we can say that in the war. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much. Now I will hand over to the Rahul. That is my next colleague. So Rahul, please.
Thank you. Hi all, my name is Rahul Radhakrishnan. In this slide, I will explain how I collected and analyzed the data for this topic. I used secondary data from trusted sources like the FAO, UNCTAD, and Statista, along with reports from companies like Deloitte. I focused on things like price changes, export volumes, and shipment costs. I also looked at how markets like Tesco and Carrefour reacted during the crisis. The key findings are grain supply chains were hit the hardest because many countries rely heavily on Ukraine and Russia. Rerouting products increased cost by up to 40%. Consumers saw prices of basic items like bread and oil go up by 10 to 15%. In the data snapshot, global food prices rose by 20% in June, just March 2022. Wheat prices jumped by 40% within 3 months. Ukraine grain exports dropped from 6 million to under 2 million tons per month. Insurance for shipping in the Black Sea doubled. In the UK and Europe, bread oil prices rose by up to 30%. So the next slide is SWOT analysis to understand how the supermarket supply chain respond to the conflict. Mainly the strengths, supermarkets quickly found new suppliers from places like India and South America. They used strong supplier networks to keep products available. Many also signed long-term contracts and focused more on local sourcing. The weakness are there was too much reliance on Ukraine and Russia for things like wheat and oil. Costs went up, especially for shipping and insurance. Supermarkets also faced product shortages and more complexity in their operations. The opportunities this was a chance to diversify sourcing, use AI and blockchain for better tracking, and build stronger partnership with nearby regions. It also pushed supermarkets to think more about sustainability. The threats, the ongoing war creates uncertainty. Climate changes may make food supply worse. Food inflation and government trade restrictions are also big risks. The next slide uses pestle analysis to look at the wider effects of the war on the supply chain. In political, sanctions and military conflict blocked trade and transport routes. In economic, higher prices for wheat, sunflower oil, and grains, plus rising shipments and insurance cost. In social, people started panic buying, food insecurity grew, and may were unhappy with the high prices and empty shelves. In legal, trade restrictions and export control rules made it hard to move good freely. In technological, supermarkets started using more AI and blockchain to track shipment and predict issues. Environmental damaged farmland and the risk climate change make future shortage worse. Supermarkets began focusing more on sustainable sourcing to reduce risk. The next slide shows how the war affected the supply chain using SCORE model, which stands for plan, source, make, deliver, and return. The plan forecasting became difficult due to supply and transport issues. Companies had to shift to more flexible short-term planning. In the source, ports were blocked and trade was restricted. Supermarkets looked for new suppliers in countries like Argentina and Canada. To make product was delayed because raw materials were not available. Many companies had to rely more on local production to fill the gaps. deliver transport was rerouted through longer, more expensive routes, which increased shipping cost. In return, there was bottlenecks in logistics. Short shelf life items couldn't be returned or redirected, which led more waste. The next slides will explain by our colleague Abdul Mois. Thank you.
Okay, so it's Abdul Muiz in front of you. So I would be discussing the outcomes, or we could say outlook of this case study. So we could divide it into two parts. So basically, it is short term and the longer term. So if we study with the short term is that the conflict still remains unresolved, and the supermarkets are still facing the pressure and the transport challenges. And the procurement terms are the higher, and the buffer check for the stocks are always high. And the supermarkets diversifies sources and adopt to new trade routes. And we could say their prices are remain still high. And if we move towards the longer term outlook, so we could see that the investment is also done by the usage of AI forecasting and the risk assessments. And if we talk about the green supply chain, which is mostly of the crops and the grains as being done by other countries, and the supply chain functions are newly imported into the broader level risk planning. And if we talk about the adopted technology, which is the supply chain analytics for the resilience. And if we move towards recommendations for the supermarket management, so we could categorize in the short term, medium term, long term, and the most important, the sustainability focus. So in the short term, we could see that there should be a diversified suppliers, and we should negotiate with the companies who help us in the logistics for the low cost efficient routes. And if we talk about the medium term is also always with the investing in your local communities and the local partnership people with across the Europe, and use predictions, analyze and makes inventory management and reduces the challenges. If we talk about the longer term, which is for the sensibility for the policies, making good policies, making a policy which is good and friendly for the supermarket, which could lower down the prices. And thirdly, we could develop a good supply chain technologies and which could minimize the cost. And the sustainability focus is always to prioritize low low the cost of the suppliers from the suppliers to get a good amount of revenue and profit from the consumers, we could say, by lower down our prices. So if we move ahead towards the conclusion, so we could say that Ukraine and Russia conflicts expose the critical weakness in the global supermarket supply chain, and which is affect ripple through every layer of the food supply network thoroughly with the if we talk about the source and logistics and each and everything. And future results will depend not on the estimating of the risk, but also the availability to respond and route and recover safely from the disruption. The Ukraine-Russia conflicts severely distribute the supermarket supply chain, especially on the grains and the oils. And the longer term resilience requires a diversification. So the call to action is that supermarkets must act now to diversify and invest, advocate to sustainable prices, and to ensure sustainability, supply chain, and profitability. And if we talk about, there are some contents which are taken from the articles. So here are the one of the most important article we could say and consider that, which are from the Winter, Gilbert, and the Zhang from the China, and we could talk about other author as well. That's all from from our sides. So that's
So thank you very much, all of you. We done our presentation, and
Thank you.
thank you.